Hello, my name is Aaron Deese, and welcome to Chasing Werewolves, the modern Dogman phenomenon. I am a writer, researcher, and content producer over at Small Town Monsters, and I have written two books on the werewolf dogman phenomenon. I've also had the opportunity to participate in two documentaries on the same topic alongside my very good friend, Shannon LeGro.
Opposite side.
I
Hello.
always
Hello,
mix things up.
everybody. I do the same thing. Every single time I'm on StreamYard, I'm like, hey, oh, no, just kidding. Yes, we did. We were able to do two different documentaries so far together, specifically on the subject, the very strange subject of Dogman.
Do you want to tell them who you are, Shannon, in case someone's been living
Oh
under a
yeah, I guess.
rock?
Okay, right. I guess I should. Okay,
Just
yes,
in case.
I'm no, not that everybody should know me, by the way. But
You should.
yes, I'm Shannon LeGro. I am the producer and host of Into the Fray. Been running about 8 years now and cover all sorts of high strange goodness, UFOs, Bigfoot, general head scratchers that you can't quite put your finger on. Those are some of my ultimate favorites. And then, of course, I have been a part of several Small Town Monsters documentaries, including On the Trail of Bigfoot. And then I also co host On the Trail of UFOs 1, 2, and 3. And then our two Dogman docs with, I did it again, this guy
Gonna point
here.
this way with
Yeah.
Shannon. The latest of which was actually I have a picture of it. Dogman territory, werewolves in the land between the lakes. So all that is just to say that Shannon and I have been dealing with this dogman stuff for a couple of years now, collectively, as well as independently through our own research. And I won't speak for you. I'm very excited to present some of the things we've encountered to our friends at Anomicon today. So thank you everybody for watching.
Ditto. Yes. Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. We hope you enjoy the Dogman subject. I know that. I mean, even for myself, I've said it on my own show. I'm like, I try to cough out the word Dogman because it just sounds silly, right? I mean, it just sounds goofy, silly. But people are seeing something. We
Hmm.
don't know what it is. They're seeing something, and actually, Aaron, would you mind if we open up with this? And I'm sorry to take the reins right out of the gate, but I kind of wanted to go to a 101 place here for a second because I know that on our shows when you and I have a conversation on ITF, I wanted to get this out of the gate, right out of the gate, because even in the books and in the docs, we interchangeably dogman and the word werewolf. So I think it's important to kind of talk about that a little bit. Why did you end up using both of those words in your books, which in turn led to us using both of those words in the docs?
Yeah, I'm more than happy to address that. And I think that's important. I agree with you. I actually prepped a slide here. What is Dogman? Because I think this is an important question when even when you're talking to folks in the quote unquote paranormal world, UFO enthusiasts, Bigfoot researchers, supernatural ghost researchers, when you mention Dogman, you mention werewolves, there's still kind of a knee jerk gut reaction that goes, this is nonsense. Why are you doing this? We have a hard enough time getting people to take Bigfoot seriously. And that was my reaction when I first encountered this stuff. But the term dogman is used to describe an upright canine form which displays bipedal locomotion. When I'm not trying to sound smart because I'm at Anomicon, it's a dog that walks on two legs. It's a wolf, a dog, a coyote, whatever you like, that walks on two legs. Now, it's not as simple as that. We have examples of dogs and canines walking on two legs as a learned behavior, as a trick, as an adaptation. We see that all the time. We see it in domestic animals, we see it in wild ones. What sets these creatures apart is that they seem to prefer to move on two legs, or at the very least, they're adapted to it in such a way that it's not a trick. It's not an adaptation to get a treat. It's something that they do with a lot of comfort. Canines aren't supposed to do that. The reason that I and a lot of other people who I won't speak for, but I can say with confidence I'm not the only one that feels this way. The reason that I use those terms interchangeably is because one, that is what eyewitnesses are describing. And we are 100% reliant. You and I have talked about this before, Shannon. You and I are you and I, all of us that research this stuff, are 100% reliant on eyewitness testimony to do what we do. If people don't share their stories, I don't really have a job anymore. When someone says to me, I saw what looks to me like a werewolf, it's not incumbent upon me as a writer, a researcher, an enthusiast to change the wording that they use, to take their words and put them into something else and say, well, they said werewolf, but really this is Dogman, when I don't even know what Dogman is. I'm pretty sure it exists, but I don't know what it is. And then the other reason, and we could maybe split hairs about this, but the etymological roots of those terms are pretty much the same. Werewolf comes from Old English terms meaning man and wolf, Dogman, dog, man. They mean pretty much the same thing. So, and then just a side note, I've written 2 books on this topic, and you can only say Dogman so many times before even you yourself writing the book start to hate it. So you got to mix up the language a little bit. But at the end of the day, this is what eyewitnesses are describing. This is what they're reporting. This is what we're going to say when we redistribute this information because it's their story, not mine.
Shannon's story time, where I'm going to share a couple of the encounters that were shared on Into the Fray. One does specifically use the term werewolf. So, and she actually kind of means werewolf, and we'll see. But okay, so another 101 question is, when you say Dogman, people automatically go, golly, those things are grumpy as heck fire. That just seems to be almost across the board. They're very in your face. They're very get off my lawn kind of guys. Why is that, do you think? Do you have any theories as to why that is?
That's a really good question, and that's what sets these encounters apart from Bigfoot activity, because if you break them down to their most basic parts, Bigfoot sightings and Dogman sightings both involve people reporting seeing an upright, bipedal, hairy creature in a place where it's really not supposed to be, that fits outside of the local wildlife that we know is in that area. And very often we have vocalizations, we have, instances where things are banged on or scratched, we have instances where rocks are thrown. Not so much the rocks in the Dogman stuff. I'm going to take that back. Can't think of any rock throwing reports in the Dogman world. But on the surface, the activity is very, very similar. The difference is when we have these clear sighting reports and when witnesses are saying unequivocally, no, I saw a canine form, not a primate, not a humanoid, not an ape, they often are also describing a sense of fear, dread, anxiety, um, symptoms that we would equate with post-traumatic stress disorder, saying that without a medical professional's opinion. People are losing sleep, they're having nightmares. Oftentimes when these encounters take place, we're hearing things like loss of bodily functions, not cool fun stuff that you run home and tell your friends about, things that people keep to themselves for many, many, many years. And we see this popping up all over the place. The 2 areas, Shannon, where you and I have done most of our on the ground research, Texas and the land between the lakes, that's a recurring trend in both of those areas. So it becomes very difficult to look at this as just potential Bigfoot activity or a different looking Bigfoot when the pattern of behavior and the eyewitness responses are overwhelmingly negative, overwhelmingly.
And something else is that I've noticed, and I don't know if you would agree with this, but it just seems to me that we talk about Bigfoot, and I love the subject of Bigfoot, of course. When you talk about the subject of Bigfoot versus Dogman, and what you said about going home and telling your buddies what happened or sharing with anybody what happened, it seems that the subject of Dogman is just that much more taboo than pretty much anything else that people could think of having an encounter with and deciding, yeah.
That definitely seems to be the case. And it's, again, it's really overwhelming. You can almost draw a line down the middle of a piece of paper and write likely Dogman encounters over here, likely Bigfoot encounters over here. And if you look at behavior profiles, it's going to be starkly different. But then again, like you said, they're much stranger. It doesn't just stop with they're more aggressive. It doesn't just stop with they were distinctly, canine. There's also the supernatural element that you and I have run into so many times when we've been talking to witnesses about this stuff.
Well, yeah, that was just some of the 101 stuff that I thought might be nice for people that are not really, maybe they're not even into the Dogman subject. And they're like, well, maybe I'll just dip my toe in there. It's a weird pool. everybody. So yeah,
It
but
is.
continue with whatever points that you think that we need to cover as well, Aaron.
Yeah, well, I think, again, defining what it is really important. So we've done that. We've chunked that information. I'd like to get into some of the reports and the stories that you and I have received because we've kind of been talking in abstraction, and people are like, okay, you say this is happening, where and when? So would you like to start off? I know you've got some
Sure,
interesting stuff.
absolutely. Absolutely. Okay, so I mentioned that there was a woman that she said werewolf and she meant werewolf. And it was on episode 290 and it was titled Werewolf of Codman Square. And so she is Tina, that is her name. She is a student at UMass Boston and she usually took a train to Codman Square and then she would walk the rest of the way home, right? Coming home from school. And just a side note, and I do think it's interesting to note because it's come up in our conversations, Aaron, with folks, is that this is supposedly sacred land, but we know. So she gets off the train and she begins walking in this residential area. And it's early fall, it's already dark, but there's still people outside. They're on their porches and they're out doing their neighborly nighttime thing, just hanging out. There are sounds. She can hear people and, birds starting to go to bed, all that kind of stuff. And then at the end of the street, there's an old church. And she said, all of a sudden, it's like all the sound just faded away. And then her ears began popping like she was on an airplane. That's what she likened it to. And she turns around and notices there's no more people anywhere outside. And the lights have all gone out. Now that's an important part that I think that could be up for discussion later. But where'd the people go that were just there? Where's the sound? Where's the lights? She says, then a crackling in the air began, and a 10-foot hedge in front of the church begins to part. And out comes a snout. It is elongated, just like a wolf. The fingers are very long, and it has long fingernails. And she estimates it at about 8 feet because of the height of the bush. It has the top half of a man, and it has a shirt on. And I asked her about this. I said, "Well, what kind of shirt was it?" And she kind of actually chuckled at that point. I remember, and she goes, I can't remember, but wouldn't it be funny if it was like a plaid shirt, like the classic werewolf shirt?" But she couldn't remember the shirt, but it had a shirt on. So again, ooh, mark that down. That's a strange note. She says instantly in her mind, she goes, "That's a freaking werewolf." That is her quote. And she said, "This is everything I've ever seen in a movie that resembles a werewolf." And she said his eyes were an orange yellow, highly luminescent. It shows her its teeth, which just like a Bigfoot, I mean, who knows what that gesture is, right? If it's
Mhm.
aggressive or just who knows. So there's still static in the air, and she ends up turning and running back into Codman Square. And she did drop her bag at the church. So she quickly goes, "Oh my gosh, like I need my keys. I got the whole thing in it." She goes back and there's people back there now. The lights are back on. She can hear sounds. There's things going on. And the bag that she dropped was sitting completely perfectly upright in the middle of the road as if it was just placed there by someone or something. The creature's gone. The bush doesn't look like there was ever even a disturbance at all. But her parting description, like her final coup de grace description of it, was it looked like the werewolves that they had designed for the movie Dog Soldiers.
Mhm.
So I mean, a shirt wearing dog man, right? Like what does that mean? I mean, that just points to the classic man turns into wolf and then well, Moon is away, so he's back to his manly self again.
That's what it makes us think of, and as bizarre as that story might sound, it's not the only time we have something like that. There's a case out of, Gregton, Texas. We didn't get to visit this place when we were filming the Dogman Triangle, Werewolves in the Lone Star State, directed by Seth Breedlove, because it's kinda way far up, it's kinda closer to
Yeah.
Oklahoma than a lot of other parts of Texas, but this woman reported to Fate magazine in the 1950s, I believe it was 55, 57, that she saw an upright canine form in her yard that had the lower half of an animal, the head of like a dog or a wolf, and it had a human-like torso. And that sounds incredulous. That sounds ridiculous. That sounds nuts, even to me as someone who's interested in this stuff. But again, why are people reporting this? Why would you make this up? It's a lot easier to say, yeah, I think I saw Bigfoot, because that's at least something that people accept as being a recurring phenomenon. Even if you don't believe in Bigfoot, you are aware of the fact that people see Bigfoot on a pretty frequent basis, or believe that they do, if you want to remain skeptical. That's a little more difficult with a werewolf. That's to me, it's so beyond the pale of something you would want to report or want to be associated with. One of the encounters that really kind of anchors me to this phenomenon, the one that got me started on this whole personal interest, came from a family member. And Shannon, you spoke with him. He goes by the name of Trent in the Dogman Triangle film. Still hasn't come forward with his name, and I don't his real name. That's a pseudonym, and I don't think he ever will. He's a family man. He's a business owner. He's a military veteran. He's not a guy who has any outside interest in this stuff whatsoever. And when he relayed his encounter to me, the language he used was, I saw what looked like a werewolf. And we were just having a conversation one day. I was like, yeah, I've been getting into more of the cryptozoology stuff. This was about 4 years ago. And he's like, well, I've never seen Bigfoot, but I think I saw a werewolf once. And I had just gotten done reading The Beast of Bray Road by Linda Godfrey and watching the STM documentary, The Bray Road Beast, available on YouTube. And it just, I was like, what? You have to tell me more about this. And he basically had your kind of atypical roadside sighting where he was driving through a very rural, wooded area, coming around a slight bend, and saw this creature crouched by the side of the road. It appeared to be feasting on roadkill. And as he saw it, it stood up on two legs and made eye contact, or what looked like made eye contact with him. And this is a guy who's been in a dangerous situation a time or two. Again, spent some time in the military, knows how to defend himself. And when you and I spoke with him, Shannon, I remember you asked him, did you feel if you had pulled over the side of the road and gone after this thing that you would have been in some kind of danger? And his answer was a pretty straight, yeah, I do. This was not something that he wanted to get any closer to. And knowing this guy personally for so many years, he's not a guy that gets rattled. I've never seen him lose his cool in any situation ever. Um, so that means something when those people, say these things. It that's what keeps taking me back to it again and again. Yeah.
Well, and in this encounter that I just shared, I love the fact that Tina was okay saying, "You know what? I've already seen all this, and I'm about to talk to Shannon about this, this, and this. I'm not going to leave out the shirt because I freaking saw that." Like she could have left that out, and I'm not trying to split hairs on an already very unique story. All of these are unique stories, but I was so thankful that she says, "Listen, this is gonna sound it's already sounding crazy, but let me tell you something. Let me take it up a level." It had a shirt on, and I don't know what to make of that. And I'm going, "Oh my goodness, I don't know what to make of that either." But I'm so thankful that she decided to share that detail.
Yeah. Well, and the fact is, and I'm not trying to make a case, or convince anybody that shapeshifters are a real thing. Do your own research, but start with this in mind. People have believed in shapeshifters for a very, very, very long time, all throughout history in all different parts of the world. Not even talking about canines and werewolves, which can be found from ancient Mesopotamia to medieval Europe to modern day America and all places in between. But the idea of a human being taking on the form, or in some cases, the spirit of an animal, has been a consistent belief with many, many people for a very long time. So it becomes difficult, when we spend so much time researching this stuff. We do try to remain skeptical, but then we get these reports that coincide with these folk tales and this historical record, and it's like, what's going on here? What, you know?
Well, and look what happened in with the story about the LBL, our most recent doc, and what Tina said about this is supposed to be sacred land, and we just build all over it, and we throw asphalt down, and we desecrate everything that we can. We cover it for our needs, and it was the same thing with out there in the LBL. There's the sacred parts of the land, and bad things happen, and who knows if that is part of the reason or the entire reason some of these maybe darker things are coming in and going, "Oh, this is an interesting spot over here. Let me just hang out for a few thousand years." I don't know.
Yeah, that's another, like you said, a consistent theme. Some of the places we visited in Texas, like Plum Creek in Lockhart, we have the Beast of Plum Creek out there. We met a gentleman named James Witter, who was an original witness to this creature's appearances in the 80s. He is as authentic of a cowboy as you can get. He literally spent his career wrangling cattle on a horse with a lasso. He's a cowboy. And when he first witnessed this thing with a few of his fellow cattle guys, back in the 80s, they made an agreement not to come forward with it because they didn't
Yep.
want a whole bunch of frenzy around it. They didn't want to be, the next Boggy Creek, the next Flatwoods. They weren't interested in that. But the story got out anyway. And then, 40 odd years later, Heather Mosier was able to track him down and we were able to get an interview with him. But Plum Creek historically was Comanche land. There's a massive battle that took place there between the native Comanche people and European descended settlers, where there were heavy losses on both sides. And there's, a ghost story that you can still see the ghosts of the Battle of Plum Creek if you go at the right time on the right day. So again, yeah, you mentioned the land between the lakes, sacred Native American ground. We had talk from people up there that these are areas where there are burial mounds, places where settlers were forcibly displaced when the government came in and established the land between the lakes. We see reports in Ohio and Wisconsin that Linda Godfrey documented that coincide with native burial grounds. So I'm hesitant to draw a direct line and say, yes, this makes it a Native American thing. But we do see this pattern of them appearing, like you said, near sacred ground, churches, graveyards, burial places. It's a traceable pattern. If we want to say a pattern requires 3 or more instances, we've got more than 3.
So, hopping back to maybe a 101 question for people that might have this is I would hazard to say most people think Dogman is a supernatural entity, but does that mean there are no cases of them being reported injured or killed? Much like we've heard with Bigfoot, we've heard of people taking shots or claiming to have felled a Bigfoot, and then off the body goes. The black helicopters come in, the whole story of the black vehicle, everything, including aircraft, comes in and takes the body. But is that the case with Dogman at all?
We do have instances where they are purported to be shot. In almost every case I can think of, the witness reports the gunfire is either being ineffective or very much not very effective, equivocated to like a slingshot, just making an impact but not really doing anything. There's a gentleman out of Dallas who goes by the name of John, who I was fortunate enough to interview a couple years ago, who will look you dead in the eye and say he's taken several shots at these things, from a fairly close range with a very powerful caliber of ammunition, and he'll see it do damage, but they get up and they keep moving. We have the story of the Converse werewolf, which goes back about 100 years, wherein one of these creatures was alleged to have killed and fed upon a young man. And when the boy's father and the local townsfolk discovered, this creature, they opened fire on it. Didn't do anything. It ran off, and those are just 2 stories where we hear those anecdotes of them being fired on. We don't have a body, obviously, or this would be a very different conversation. We do have some physical evidence that I feel we can make a case as being legitimate. Probably the most striking is the one that was captured by our friends Jesse and Joe over at Hellbent Holler, of the thermal image of a canine form in the woods. It's been examined by wildlife guys, hunters, people who know how thermal technology works, and nobody can seem to figure out what this thing is. Can't tell you for sure that's a thermal image of a Dogman. Can tell you it's a very, very strange thermal image of a large canine appearing form in an area where we have repeated and historical Dogman reports coming in. That's what I can tell you. So
When we were in that spot with those guys, and then you and Joe go over to that same exact berm. That is invaluable, is being able to go to the exact spot where it happened. Invaluable. Anyhow, you guys went over to that berm and we're doing the comparison. You guys' heads and shoulders look teeny tiny, tiny
yeah,
comparatively. I mean, you're kind of going, how I don't even know how you would even begin to fake this. Not that they do. Those guys are bad to the bone. They go out every single freaking day, it seems like, and are doing something. Check out Hellbent Holler, Jesse and Joe for sure. So, yeah, that was That was really a mind blower for me because everyone's like, there's no evidence of these things. That is just not true. And
Just
no,
not
we
true.
cannot prove 100%, like you said, that that is a dogman in that thermal image. But golly, is it compelling?
Hmm. Yeah, it's something. It's something strange, and we haven't figured out what it is. Yeah, and yes, there's a pretty impressive body of evidence when it comes to Sasquatch research. 100%. I don't think it's too much of a stretch for me to say that, yeah, I'm pretty sure Bigfoot is a real thing. But we have that evidence in the Dogman world too. We just don't have as much of it. And we also run into this problem. What does a Dogman print look like? We don't know. What does a Dogman carcass look like? We don't know. Give the time and elements a little bit of space, and they're going to render any remains as almost unrecognizable in the wild. Decomposition happens very, very quickly. What is going to differentiate a dogman skull from a wolf skull or a large coyote skull? And if someone is not looking for that, they're going to write it off. So when we say like, why haven't we found a dogman body? I think there are actually a few reasons why we wouldn't have, that being chief among them. So how often do we find dead bears in the woods? Not very often, but when we do, we know they're bears.
Yeah, and when you talk about decomposition, something that always sticks in my mind is something that Cliff Barackman had said on a show. He said, an elephant takes 6 months to break down, and that's usually in a much drier climate with a lot less ground brush and all the creepy crawlies that happen in a forest, especially a climate. So that's always something that stuck with me, when everyone's like, well, where's the bones? But like you said, if you're not looking for that, I do wonder how many times hikers, hunters, whatever, have been out and just walked right over a cryptid type of a skeleton that could change everything and not known it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because you're not looking for that. It's not,
Yeah.
you
Like, who
know,
would think twice about that?
yeah, yeah. We find animal bones in the wild all the time. So why should we assume this is anything different? And
I mean,
even if
look at
we,
Coyote Peterson. He's great at finding
oh
Bigfoot
yeah, yeah,
skulls,
you don't want to get me
I
started
mean, he
on.
found a fully intact one. How about that?
Oh yeah, because it's really easy to get stuff through borders and custom control. It's very
Sorry, I
easy. Yeah.
digress. We get heated when we talk about that, but okay, sorry.
Yeah, yeah. No, we're just chatting.
Awkward.
We're just having fun. Nobody's listening. Uh, but no, and even if say we took every bone, every strange carcass, every weird hair sample, and sent it off for DNA testing in pursuit of Dogman. We have the Texas Chupacabra, aka the Texas Terror Dog, down here. If you haven't ever seen that, folks, Google it. I'm sure you'll find it real quick. But that blew up in the mid 2000s, late 90s as being this new version of the Chupacabra. Well, we finally got a couple samples taxidermied, and we found out that, yeah, this is kind of a new animal. We can classify it as a cryptid, but it's a mix of Mexican red wolf, coyotes, maybe some foxes, and some domestic canines. So if we're looking at Dogman as potentially a new canine species or offshoot or hybrid, why would we expect its DNA to look anything different than what I just described, a canine mix of some kind? But then, of course, we butt our heads up against the supernatural side of things, which we've touched on a little bit. And based on those stories, the ones that fall in the stranger realm, really beginning with the one wearing the shirt, there's not really any reason for us to assume that these things would function like regular animals at all. So that's hard too.
Yeah, that's something that I just keep coming back to. I'm like, the chances of them having the mommy and the daddy dog and they make it the baby dogs and they're living in the dens, and I just don't see that. I don't think that it's impossible. Or if they do, they also have the ability to open like the Marvel Sparkle Circle and then travel in and out of that. So
Yeah, the thing that saved Gambit.
that's
I
right.
saw Wolverine last weekend.
Sounds like he's
Um,
gonna have his own movie.
Sounds
That was a
like that.
great, great movie.
I was really happy about it. Yeah.
Deadpool Wolverine. Go see
What
it. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, I enjoyed it. We can talk about it
It's
anytime.
awesome.
It was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, it was. I haven't laughed like that in a movie in a long time. Okay, sorry,
Same
we're
here.
way
Well,
digressing. Sorry, I'm the queen of that, everyone. Okay, did you want me to continue with my last encounter that I was going to share with everybody?
yes. Yeah, and then we'll talk
Okay.
about, Daryl and Martin because that's where our
Yes.
journeys intersect. So, yes.
Yes. Okay. All right. So this was episode 197 of Into the Fray, and I titled it Dire Wolf Under the Supermoon. And this is Deborah, and she moved to Oklahoma to help care for her mother. And she worked the night shift and she ended up leaving home usually around 9:30 p.m. And she ends up slamming on her brakes to avoid hitting a deer that just blasted right across the road. And she had her windows down and heard a very loud growl after she had initially stopped. Now, this is a very wooded area, right? With trees like right alongside of the road. And a couple nights later, she ends up seeing a pair of red eyes in the woods, but she said they were strangely high up, a little bit too high up for her comfort, she said. So fast forward just a little bit, and she's at home, and it's 3:30 a.m. And keep in mind, she's a night owl. She works nights. So she's up, and she had purchased a brand new camera, and she's trying to get used to it. And there was a super moon that night. So she thought, well, I'll go out and practice with it and see what's doing with this thing. And their house sits on 3 acres, and it has a 6 foot tall fence surrounding the entire thing. So she and her little dog go out, but she ends up very quickly actually getting a bad feeling. She just can't quite put her finger on what it was. So she takes the dog back in and comes out alone because she's figuring, maybe it's a cat or goodness knows what. And she's got a little dog. So in he goes. She's back out sitting on the porch, scrolling through some pictures on her camera when she sees something out of the corner of her eye. She said, "It is a huge, huge dog-like creature that is sniffing the ground and grunting really loudly. And he's swaying." Oh, sorry, I said he. There I go again. It is swaying back and forth as it's sniffing. And it stops. It stops literally 15 feet in front of her and just looks away. It's acting like it doesn't even see her there. She gets a really good look at it from the side. She says it has scraggly gray hair, a huge dog-like tail, and huge pointed ears with some tufts of hair at the top. We've heard that before.
Mhm.
And huge canine-like back legs. Long hair around its neck like a lion's mane, and a hump on its back, which we've also heard before because sometimes the description, it sounds more like a hyena that can walk on 2 legs, right? So when it pointed its head straight again, she saw this super long snout and a bit of the eyes, which were amber colored. So again, some kind of a yellow amber is the theme here for my stories today. She estimates on all fours that it was about 4 feet tall at the shoulders. So yikes. And the body did seem to taper at the waist. It reminded her of a dire wolf and smelled like a wet dog. So that's interesting. She was close enough, well, and horrifying. She was close enough to smell it. Dang. Yeah, she's baffled as it never turned to look at her. Like it never ever acknowledged she was there. And she says, she's like, I'm sitting on the porch and her camera screen is, on. She's going through photos and it's yeah, there's a super moon, but it's dark outside. She goes, I
Mhm.
was illuminated by this screen. It just simply put its nose back down to the ground. It starts sniffing again. It's swaying again too, she said, and it glided off. Those were her words. She called it gliding, right? She notes how quiet it was when this all began. Here we go again with that same stuff until she did not see it anymore. Now, she admits that she definitely wanted to take a picture because I can hear everybody on the other side of the screen going, "What the heck? She has a freaking camera." Would you really wanna go and like, make any extra noise if it's not noticing you? I'm sorry, just put yourself in her shoes for 2 seconds. I'm sure that you would not. So she did the right thing there. I'm sorry, guys. So
Oh, yeah. I'm with you.
with it not noticing her, I think that to me, that's why this one stood out obviously just so much because normally, and I brought this up as a one-on-one question. I'm like, man, they're in your face. They're so aggressive. They're like, here I am. Come at me, bro. That is their modus operandi. That's what they go off of. And this is the total opposite. He's just like, "Do, do, 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 do. This smells good. This smells good. Okay, off I go." I mean, I think that she's very lucky and she knows that she is and admits, yeah, take lifting that camera to take a picture was not going to happen because by some grace of whatever, it did not notice me. And
Mhm.
15 feet. That's a bag of nope right there when it
Mhm.
comes to Dogman. I'm sorry. That's and you can definitely hear it in her voice. Like when she's retelling that, that is what she saw. I mean, that we sit with people like this and you're like, that's what they saw.
Yeah, it's not. This may be more of a general thing, but I believe very strongly that we can sit here and be subjective about, what did or did not happen, what phenomenon this category is, what they really were experiencing, but when they say this is what I remember and this is how I responded to it, that's not subject to our interpretation. Like, I can't tell you what's going on in your head. So then it's down to this person's either lying to me or they genuinely believe what they're telling me. Why would you lie about werewolves, bro? I get sure, okay. There's problem. There's I'm sure there are some fraudulent reports out there. Absolutely, especially now that this topic is gaining more popularity and more people are discussing it. The data pool is going to be polluted. That's fine. We've had the same problem in the ghost, UFO, and Bigfoot worlds for decades, getting up on a century. So it still comes down to why lie about this? Why? Why? The one that, I think is really difficult for me to process and fit into any given category, and you might agree with me with this on this, Shannon, is the most recent encounter that Martin Groves and Daryl Denton had in the Land Between the Lakes. And for anyone who's not familiar with that, Martin Groves is a former law enforcement officer, was active in the LBL area for many, many, many years, had his own encounter with one of these creatures in the early 90s, and then started documenting additional reports as they arrived on his desk. Mr. Denton is a former mayor, alderman, politician in the area, well known, well respected in his community. These are guys that, again, if you're talking about witnesses you can trust who are credible, you can't do much better than Daryl and Martin. And they had this recent encounter in the Land Between the Lakes where they saw one of these things that seemed to interact with the environment around it. It disturbed the brush. It seemed to rustle the gravel. It could be heard moving when it finally did leave. But it also was accompanied by a strange kind of fog or mist that seemed to settle on the area very quickly. It also appeared to be translucent. They were able to perceive the environment behind it or around it while still being able to see its actual physical form. And it had the glowing eyes that we hear about so often in these reports. I think, and I don't have a chart in front of me, but I think if we looked at most documented Dogman reports, we're going to see more that involve these illuminated eyes than ones that don't. And very often we're seeing yellow, blue, red seems to come up a lot. This creature, I believe, Daryl and Martin did describe it as having blue eyes. I'm about 99% on that. It could have been yellow.
I think so.
I believe they were blue, though.
Yeah, I think that they are.
Yeah, blue keeps sticking out in my head. And they both saw this thing. And this is one of those cases where once this thing showed up, the sense of dread, the sense of panic, fear was almost immediate. Both of these gentlemen were left with physical exhaustion, nausea, migraines, again, not pleasant stuff, not fun, manly stuff. Like, I went out in the woods and I threw up. Look how cool I am. Very bizarre, very strange encounter. And it's in this area where these things continually seem to take place. This was as recent as, I believe it was 2022. We were there in 2023 and it had been about a year. So yeah, 2022, right around the time you and I were filming Dogman Triangle. Actually, I believe it was within 30 days when I looked at the calendar. So this is an ongoing phenomenon. It's something that's all throughout history with us, but it hasn't stopped.
Martin describes, I mean, feeling so sick and so quickly and so violently. And I'm just, when you listen to those two gentlemen, and I wish that everybody watching and listening could come along with us and just be a fly on the wall for a lot of these interviews, because it's a whole lot different to be in there. But these folks experience what they said they did, and it's not easy for anybody, especially for people in positions that Martin and Daryl have held, to come out and say, here is my list of completely strange and crazy sounding to most people things. And I'm going to go through every single point on here. And by the way, I could barely lift my head up. And like you said, it's not a cool story. Cool story, bro. Like, you got sick in the woods and you saw a monster. Well, but they did. They are saying that they did. And I mean, I definitely believe them 100%. And, I think that when Martin is, I think, for a lot of people, kind of, I would say, a gateway drug for some people into the subject of Dogman, because Martin has got a couple of different encounters, and neither one of them are, let's go over and pet the fuzzy, cute little, happy little dog over there.
Yeah.
Neither one of them. So, yeah, I'm so thankful to people like Martin and Daryl that decide not only, and just like I said about Tina sharing this part about the shirt, which is such a, like, you just, whoa, didn't see that coming. There are so many parts of all of these encounters you're like, whoa, didn't see that coming. Thank goodness they were willing to share,
Yeah.
because we have to have all the data points that we can get, because like you said, we just don't have a lot of physical evidence of these things at all. And all we have is our conjecture and these data points to go off of.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, when you're looking at someone who has something to risk, has something to lose by sharing a story like this, regardless of whether or not your friends, your family, the people around you accept what you're saying and believe you, you can have the most open-minded, compassionate, understanding support group of people around you in the world, and you are still the guy that had a Bigfoot story. You're
Yep.
still the guy that had a UFO encounter. That's just the way it is. So these folks are taking a risk. It's not as simple as logging onto Facebook or Reddit and posting a comment and, oh, I did that. Like it's you could argue that for a lot of these folks, it changes their entire lives. Having the initial encounter, and then once you've come forward publicly and your name is out there, being associated with that phenomenon, it takes a risk. It takes a leap. My job is easy. I just write books about it and say, well, maybe this happened, but there's a real human impact to these stories, a tremendously human one. And you could argue that this whole phenomenon is somehow tied to us as human beings because it has been with us for so very long. I had made a list of historical references to werewolves to rattle off. I won't do that, but so many cultures have talked about this idea, whether it's a shapeshifter or just some kind of a creature as is of the upright walking canine form.
So you won't, I agree, like maybe not to rattle off the list, but can you give me a general guess on a percentage as far as what percentage thinks it's, the shape shifting doohickey over here, and what percentage is on the complete opposite end of the spectrum with it?
As far as like people today or just in general going back
Just
through,
the whole going back all the way through. Is it
it's
heavier one side or the other?
it seems overwhelmingly our ancestors regarded this as something dark and spiritual. Going back to ancient Mesopotamia, these were considered demonic creatures that were summoned by the elder god Tiamat. And we see some similar ideas in the Mahabharata and the Bhagavad Gita in Hindu religious texts. We see that same idea in the European werewolf. Sorry, I said I wasn't going to do the list, but it overwhelmingly seems to be something that is otherworldly, that goes beyond the veil of what we completely understand. Some of these legends are people, that are doing this and are able to tap into these spiritual energies and take on these other forms. Some of them are just purely what we would define as, quote, demonic entities. And I'm hesitant to throw that term around. I think it gets
Right.
overused today, but that's how these older religious texts would describe them or would typify them, as some kind of a dark spiritual presence. So it's tough. As far as the modern research community is concerned, in from where I sit, it seems like it's 50-50. I think we're kind of split down the middle as far as people that are convinced this is a physical animal, people who are convinced this is something very spiritual, and then I think there's maybe more of a minority that kind of sit in the middle and go, maybe it's both. I don't know where I'm at. I flip flopping back and forth across this fence every day, so I don't know.
Big ditto on that, my friend. Yeah, it depends on what day it is and who I'm speaking to and
Mhm.
what their data points are. I'm like, yep, that's a puppers that grew up in that den, and he's just angry about his lot in life for whatever reason. And other days it's the sparkle circle, and he's gonna leave after you wet yourself. And
Yes.
sorry about your therapy bills, bro. Like,
Just
I don't
I'm an eldritch horror from beyond the veil, and I don't care how you feel. Like that's kind of the general attitude they seem to have. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll say it again, it's bring the brown pants, man.
Mhm.
Everybody wants to talk tough until it's bring the brown pants day, you know?
Dogman Day is probably a brown pants day.
I would
Would be for
hazard to
me.
say pretty much any day for the Dogman would be Brown Pants Day.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. So I think this is probably a good point to kind of take all of this in, try to summarize everything we've talked about, because if anyone has been patient enough to tune in since minute 1, we're creeping up on 45 here, your head may be spinning. My head often spins in this world. So what we can conclude with when it comes to the Dogman werewolf question is that one, this is an old phenomenon. This is an old idea. We kind of talked about that at length, but our ancestors were interested in this concept as far back as ancient Mesopotamia. What really cinches it, what really grounds it for me, is that it is also recurring. It is also ongoing. All of these modern witnesses, just a few that Shannon and I had time to talk about in the last, again, 45 minutes, they paint this picture for us wherein we can't stop and go, this was just an old folk tale, and then it became a movie, and then some people saw Bigfoot and misidentified it. And that might be the most important point, other than the human element. The way this thing affects people is that this is a legitimate, independent phenomenon. It might take us into the realm of Bigfoot research, but very, very quickly it goes down its own path. And I think those two words, that's kind of what nails it for me. It's a legitimate phenomenon, and it's very much worthy of continual study.
Yeah, and for anybody on the fence on this, and I'm not just saying this so you'll go watch our documentaries. I just want you to go immerse yourself in this a little bit, just beyond maybe some of the Reddit pages and things, and just watch people as they're speaking and listen to their voice, listen to their tone and their inflection and the emotion that they impart when they are speaking about their experiences. Because I know that even without being there in person, you will be able to tell that that is exactly what this person experienced. And we really do. We need all the data points that we can get. No matter how cuckoo and crazy you think they sound, they aren't. We listen to this stuff day in and day out. And much like Tina being willing to share about a shirt wearing werewolf, it's okay. Just share. Just share it with somebody.
Yeah,
Absolutely. Doesn't even have to be with us. But if they do want to share with us, right?
email
Then
us.
get in touch with us,
Uh,
please.
email
Don't
us.
hesitate to do that. So it's Aaron at smalltownmonsters.com and me, Shannon at intothefrayradio.com. And interchangeably, just like Dogman and Werewolf, email the other and say pass it along to the other. That's fine. We will do that. It's not a big deal. So
Yeah,
please just thank you for listening to us
thank
drone
you.
on about one of our favorite subjects, right, Aaron?
It is. It very much is. Sometimes I'll think I'm gonna not do Dogman stuff for a while, and then I get 3 more reports, and I'm right back into it. It's
It's
a
right
very
back.
captivating subject. Yeah, they say sometimes the phenomenon chooses you, and I feel that that's happened to me with the Dogman stuff. So no matter how bizarre your story is, no matter how outlandish you think it is, there's a pretty good chance there are 1 or 2 other stories that have some things in common with it, and that you are not the only one experiencing or that has experienced an encounter with one of these creatures. I'm speaking directly to any potential experiencers who might be listening or watching. We hear you. We see you. Come talk to
Y-
us.
It's funny you say that, Aaron, because I try to really stick that home on my show because someone will say, there's this little thing that happened. I don't know if I should really share it. And I don't push them, but I'm like, well, if you want to, and it to them, like, they're like, "Well, it's just a small little stupid little thing," and maybe in a whole barrage of this massive thing that they just shared. But that one little tiny thing is what got 3 other people reaching out to me going, "Oh my god, I thought I was the only one." And
Mm-hmm.
that was the catalyst that got them to go, "I'm not alone," and now I wanna talk about it. So,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I second that big time.
100%. Yeah. Well, I think that brings us to our time, Shannon, unless you have anything else.
No closing words, just, be safe out there, guys. Pack the brown pants just in case you go hiking.
Yep. Yep. Stay safe. Be kind. Thank you for coming to Anomicon. Thank you for hanging out with us. Be sure to, I'm not sure when in the programming block this will air, but stick around for the rest of Anomicon. Check out smalltownmonsters.com to see more of the stuff that Shannon and I have been involved in. And have a great day. Yeah.
Bye, everybody.